Good afternoon, everyone. We will get started in just a minute. Okay, we are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to register and join us for the RITIS user group meeting for today, September 4th. My name is Nicole, and I'm with the Eastern Transportation Coalition. And we will go over a few housekeeping items. We are using Zoom webinar. So for audio, you can use your computer or your phone. We are recording this meeting so we can provide it at a later time for those who may have missed it or anyone who wants to review it. If you have any questions or difficulties with this, please reach out to me. That should say Nicole. And my email is there, nforest@tetcoalition.org. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A box and we will answer the questions there. This is just how you access the Q&A. Any questions, you can also email me if you're having trouble with that. If you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Just click on the raise your hand button and we will unmute you to allow you to speak or say anything that you would need to say. And we have our next RITIS user group meeting planned for December 4th. So we should be having the invite go out around October. So you can note this meeting and keep an eye out for that email invite. So I would like to welcome Jesse Burke. He is the Associate Director of Capital Programs and Project Development with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Council. He is also our RITIS user group co-chair. So Jesse oversees development and maintenance of the Transportation Improvement Programs, or TIPS, for the 4-county New Jersey portion of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Council region, as well as the 5-county Pennsylvania region. With a varied background, including congestion management, project development and coordination, and equity analysis, Mr. Burke seeks to align performance-based planning and programming analysis with local and regional planning goals. He serves as co-chair of the Eastern Transportation Coalition's RITIS user group and has worked closely with PennDOT to provide planning assistance for the multi-year, multi-billion-dollar reconstruction of I-95 in Philadelphia. So I would love to hand it over to Mr. Burke. Jesse?
Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate the introduction. I'm going to move to the next slide. I'll go over the agenda for today. Thanks, everybody, for attending. As always, we've got some great attendance from all around the country, and we have another great meeting for you. We've already covered some of the housekeeping items. I'm just going to go over a couple more things, introduce you to our speakers today, and then we'll move into our presentations. We have a great spotlight presentation for you today on measuring and visualizing performance for the Sparks Intelligent Corridors project in Nevada. Greg Jordan will also cover using trips data to calibrate travel demand models, something I know we've done here at DVRPC, and I would assume of interest to a lot of folks. And as usual, Michael Pack and Charles Latimer will cover some new features and capabilities, things that the CAT Lab has been working on as we always continue to improve the tools that are available here. And finally, we'll close with our usual feedback session. So again, just encourage folks to, if you have questions about any of the presentations, put them into the Q&A, raise your hand. We love to make this a discussion. So we appreciate all the feedback throughout. Next slide. So just to introduce today's speakers, we have a great lineup as always. Michael Pack is from the University of Maryland Cat Lab, where he's the director. Michael works to make transportation data more easily accessible and usable by ops, planners, and researchers, and does a fantastic job of it. He previously worked at the University of Virginia and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Greg Jordan is also with the Cat Lab. He's the feature manager of the Cat Lab's trip analytics toolset. Prior to joining the Cat Lab, Greg managed a helicopter survey company that conducted origin, destination, and routing surveys using aerial video to trace vehicles. And now that the technology has evolved and we have the tools we do today, he's also used those helicopter results to validate some of the INRIX trip paths data sets for OD surveys. And Greg's drawn on these experiences to help design new capabilities and features for trip analytics. We're also excited today to welcome Alex Wolfson. Alex is a project manager with the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, Nevada. Alex is responsible for managing the RTC's traffic operation and ITS capital improvement program. And he has over 11 years of engineering experience in the public sector, including time spent with the Nevada Department of Transportation, as well as the city of Reno. And last but not least, we have Charles Latimer from the University of Maryland Cat Lab also. Charles helps transportation agencies improve communications through better data visualization. His roles at the Cat Lab involve promoting user-focused enhancements to the RITIS suite of performance tools and guiding development of the RITIS signal analytics platform. So between his time spent with the university and the private sector, Charles has over 22 years of experience in transportation data and intelligent transportation systems. So a lot of knowledge in the webinar today, as always. And then I think if we move to the next slide, I think we have a couple polls for folks. So I'll kick it back to you, Nicole, for those polls.
All right, so I will put up the poll. So you will see the polls should pop up on your screen and you can go ahead and answer those if you wish. Give it another minute or so. Looks like we're holding steady here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And we can continue on. All right. All right. We ready for the next slide?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks everybody for completing the polls. Always nice to know how people are using the tools. So with that, we're excited to get to our spotlight presentation, measuring and visualizing performance for the Sparks Intelligent Corridors project. So take it away, Alex. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and good morning/afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. I am going to share my screen, so I might struggle for just a brief second, but then I'll get it under control here, hopefully. So let's give this a try. Cool. All right, does everything look good?
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Thank you again. So, good morning/afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Wolfson. I'm a project manager for the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, Nevada. I'm excited to get to present here today on this project, Sparks Intelligent Corridors. I think this is a pretty unique project, and it was something new that we decided to try, and I think it's had some really interesting impacts, and so I'm glad to get to share it with the group. So, what is the Sparks Intelligent Corridor? So before I get into that, let's talk a little bit about the RTC of Washoe County. So we are in the other part of Nevada, not Las Vegas, and so I've kind of shown a quick map here of where we're at and some other cities/events nearby. We are kind of a three-headed monster here. So we are the Reno, Nevada region's MPO. We also run and handle the public transportation transit for this region. And then we also have an engineering and construction portion as well, where we do a lot of capacity projects, corrective maintenance on larger regional roads, and that sort of thing. As part of that as well, we also help with traffic operations and are trying to get more involved. So we'll go into little facts about our area. So basically, we have three local agencies that we work with and strive to try and unite: City of Reno, City of Sparks, and Washoe County. Our metro population is around 500,000-ish. And then we have 425 traffic signals within our service area. And so while we don't directly own or maintain the traffic signals, we assist the local agencies with everything operations related on those signals, with a big focus of trying to make sure we're coordinating across city boundaries and those kind of things. As you can see here too, I just want to point out, so this is Sparks Intelligent Corridor. So Sparks is on the east. Reno and Sparks are kind of sister cities. You can't really tell where one city begins and the other ends. Oops, wrong way. So here's the project location that we did this in with Sparks. And so Spanish Springs was our focus area. Spanish Springs is kind of part of Sparks, kind of part of Washoe County. But it is a classic definition of suburban sprawl. It's one of those areas where in the morning, everybody commutes south into the main part of Reno and Sparks for work. And in the evenings, everybody drives back to Spanish Springs to go home. And so you see those very extreme the directional kind of volumes and impacts there. And this one's no different. Where this area becomes challenging for us is that we don't have any freeways that serve this area directly, which means all of the traffic movements and traffic management has to occur on arterials that have lots of traffic signals. And so on this map here, I've kind of highlighted the different roads that are impacted, and the different colors really are showing where different right-of-ways are. And so depending on which direction traffic goes, they're going to cross through City of Sparks right-of-way, City of Reno right-of-way, Washoe County, and then some of these roads are NDOT roads or state DOT. And so trying to like coordinate between those can get challenging, especially when you're trying to kind of have a system, when you're trying to manage it. And so we're like, okay, how do we move traffic better through here? So that was kind of our goal is we're kind of an up and coming MPO. We don't have an active arterial traffic signal management program. You know, we retime our signals every 3 years or so, but we don't necessarily have like a good way to actively manage our traffic if an incident occurs there. You know, we do a good job setting our schedules on our signals, but that was about it. And so we wanted to get more into like the active management, right? ITS, it could be, you know, alerting people of incidents, trying to actually adjust signal timing, those kind of things. But there was a lot of challenges to this. Multiple jurisdictions, like I mentioned, high cost, right? So, you know, we were looking at, do you install flow detectors, maybe some dynamic message signs on the arterials? You know, that's expensive, not just for the initial construction, but the long-term maintenance, right? Like those devices do cost a lot of money. And then you have logistics. I know one thing for me I struggle with is if you do dynamic message signs on an arterial, like where do you put them? There's so many different ways people could be entering or leaving that arterial that it's really hard to like figure out the right locations. Whereas at least when you do a freeway, everybody's kind of funneled into one area, and so you can make like more educated guesses. Also, too, I didn't put it on here, but like a lot of local agencies, the city of Sparks doesn't have a lot of staffing resources, and so the more automated this could be, the better. They wanted to avoid having to spend a lot of staff resources on it, which I can appreciate. So the solution we came up with after looking at it was, let's try like a strictly virtual system. We'll basically use vehicle trajectory data to kind of to monitor traffic and make our decisions and understand when we're seeing impacts. And with that, we propose to use dynamic signal timing, not necessarily like adaptive signal timing where it's off the shelf, but like more, can we, set the logic parameters on this and have it change to certain pre-made plans when we know the traffic on the corridor is at a level that justifies it. We also wanted to look at virtual message signs. So this would be geofenced alerts for an incident or travel time advisory, those kind of things. And it would only send to people who cross into that geofence going a specific direction. So we saw that maybe that could be a way to kind of replicate what a dynamic message sign does. So ultimately, after working through different vendors and consultants and stuff, we kind of came up with our concept for how the system would work. So we have the NRITIS cloud data. That's basically our data engine there feeding, all of that traffic information we need. We paid for, I forgot how many centerline miles it was, but we're buying the live traffic data feed from them and we're accessing their API. And then Kimley Horn was our design consultant on it. So they used their Traction Connect software to sort of act as the logic engine. And so what happens is NRIX is pulling the data from the vehicles, the resolution data. It's ingested by Traction Connect, and then based on the thresholds or kind of parameters set, Traction Connect acts as our logic engine. And if it meets certain parameters, it will actually send an alert back to the vehicle via cell phone or infotainment system. And then also it'll communicate with our ATMS for the signal control and actually invoke a special plan if it's warranted. So kind of want to show how it works. So these are, because right now we don't have any traffic, so these are just screenshots here, but this is actually a screenshot of the dashboard. And so what those little car icons with the clock on top, what that means is those are almost like our waypoints, our travel time waypoints. So kind of looking at it from like an origin destination standpoint, just important junction areas where we wanted to measure travel time along these routes. So we'll kind of put this in action here. So the way we kind of set this up with the logic was we wanted to look at just the entire corridor travel time and wait till it hits certain thresholds. And so this one here, Sparks Boulevard, northbound 11 minutes. Basically, the way we set this up is that if the travel time were to exceed 12 minutes for 5 consecutive minutes, it would turn on the special timing plan. Now, the 5 consecutive minutes is important. So if we are over that for 3 minutes, it actually drops back down and then goes back above. That 5-minute clock resets basically. So it really does have to be 5 consecutive minutes. So let's just pretend we hit our 13 minutes here. So, and we've done it for 5 minutes, which means special plan activates. The line actually does turn green on the map so that it's active. Now we've been running it for a while. Traffic's starting to clear. How do we turn it back off? On this one, we want travel time below the 13-minute threshold for 20 consecutive minutes. Same logic as invoking it, just a longer consecutive minute kind of threshold there. The reason we did that is we didn't want this plan to constantly be cycling back and forth. I think we wanted to really make sure that traffic was cleared, especially because we know that the more often traffic signals have to transition, it's not just something where you snap your fingers and the traffic signals are all just synced up with your new plan. Transition time takes a while. And so we wanted to really focus on making sure it activated when it was needed, but not having it constantly cycle back and forth, because then it'd be kind of defeating the purpose. So traffic's clear now. We're back down to 11 minutes. Timing plan turns off. So now we'll really get into how we piloted this. So our pilot corridor here is Sparks Boulevard northbound, kind of like I showed on that. We picked this one because during the afternoon commute, we were just seeing travel times that varied heavily depending on what was going on other corridors. Going northbound, just a very busy road. It's a fairly reliable route, but it also gets a lot of demand. And so this was the route we went. Gregg Street to Los Altos Parkway were the limits. This included 10 traffic signals, and it's about a 5-mile long corridor. So, before we kind of went into the performance, we needed to understand, how we were going to determine those thresholds. And so we used data that we pulled from RITIS here, and we actually plotted hypothetically, based on our different thresholds, what that would look like. And so one thing I want to emphasize here, the travel time you're seeing, this system was not actually running, but we were just trying to simulate if it was running, what might that look like? And we looked at our 20-minute threshold to turn it off, the 5 minute to start, just to kind of get an idea. And I think we looked at it, we saw this was generally the pattern each day, so we felt fairly comfortable that 13 was worth trying. We also wanted to look to when traffic did clear, how quickly it did it, because we actually started higher on that 20 minutes. I think we were at 30 minutes initially, and that seemed too long. And so we just kind of used this for some just virtual kind of scenario planning. One thing in addition to when we were running this is, so while we didn't actually command the controllers, we were running virtual controllers in the background. And so we actually did know when it was triggering and when it would turn off. It just wasn't actually going to the field, but we were just trying to get an idea of how this might run if and when we implement it in the field. So fortunately, after a lot of testing, we did get to the point where we're comfortable implementing it in the field. And we're still actually running the system, but for the purposes of our project performance report, we tabulated the results from February through April. We did a comparison for February through April in 2024 and 2025. We focused on that 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday window, that classic PM peak. Initial results were very promising. Travel times, the aggregated travel time for the whole corridor, we saw an 11.4% reduction in travel time during that period. And then we also saw an 11% improvement in buffer time as well, which I think was pretty exciting. And I'll get into what those means in a second. So before we talk about how we achieved those travel time reductions, I wanted to kind of show one of the things we looked at was kind of the more quantitative features of this, how often did it activate? And so this is just a simple kind of bar graph here that just shows when the most frequent activations of the timing plan were. And most of the time it's kind of what you'd expect, 3:50 up to about 4:30 as it was our most common time that it would activate. But we'd actually see we'd have some incidents and stuff early on, and so we get some activations as early as 3:20. And even sometimes we'd get our first activation almost at 6 o'clock. We almost cleared everything with our normal time of day plan, but not quite. And so it's kind of just interesting to see, when the frequencies occurred. Similarly, we did the same exercise for the deactivations. And so you'll actually see there was one at 3:20 and 3:30. We didn't show it on here just because we didn't want the graph to get too big, but we were seeing some activations around 2 o'clock too for shorter time frames, mostly due to a high school along the corridor when school would be out and we would see that activation. But most of the time you actually saw it was pretty consistent on turning off at that 5:40 to 5:50, but we would see it sometimes extend to 6 o'clock. Now that we've been running it longer too, we've actually had one recently where we had some flooding and a lot of other north-south arterials were closed. And so as a result, everybody was having to use Sparks Boulevard. And I don't think it turned off till almost 8 o'clock that night. So that's where I think, it can definitely help. So now we'll get into the actual travel time results here. And so once again, using RITIS, we looked at the 24 versus 25. And so you can see where that 11.4% comes from. I think our observation is this system would do a good job of when travel times are starting to kind of go up. This could catch that and it wouldn't get rid of the peak. It wouldn't necessarily even fully get rid of the delay, but it could smooth off that peak and prevent it from reaching those higher levels. Buffer time, I think, was even more, we were more encouraged by. So for those who don't know buffer time, I'll try to explain it my best. I don't know if I fully have a great definition of it, but it's essentially if you're driving to work every day and it generally takes 10 minutes, but when there's delays and stuff, it could go up to 5 minutes extra, 15-minute travel time. That's kind of like a buffer time of around 5 minutes, right? It's really just kind of a measure of travel time reliability, which is what we thought was pretty important. And I think really what we were trying to do out of the system. If congestion was that consistent every day, then we would be able to solve every issue with our time of day plans, which is not always the case. And you can see here, the 11% that I showed on one of the previous slides was if you kind of aggregated it across the 2 to 8 p.m. But you could see in that like 4:30, 4:45 window, we're actually seeing buffer times reduced by up to 77.5%. And I think that's because we kind of had this more aggressive on-demand timing plan where when it was needed, we would, it's ready to go, and we can kind of help, accommodate all that extra traffic due to whatever the incident is that's causing it, right? So kind of similar to what we did when we were trying to figure out our thresholds, we were like, okay, let's go ahead and actually plot, like, now that we, let's pick a day, let's actually plot when the system activated and deactivated so we could see the results. And so once again, this was for travel time. We took the RITIS dashboard data, we created it. So you can see like that activation on the left here, we were running pretty similar. The system activated and actually as a result was able to bring the travel time down a little bit before it deactivated, and kind of got the corridor on a better foot. Similarly, the 2024 never recovers, whereas now, okay, we hit about 4 o'clock, it's picking up again, we activate, we're able to keep that number lower and hang in there. So I think, when you look at the activations and the cancellations, it seemed reasonable. Now let's look at buffer time. So one thing that's a little confusing about this is that we picked a day where basically based on what RITIS was telling us, and I believe this, is that, with that aggressive timing plan running, we essentially kept our travel time kind of within that historical average, like where you generally would expect it. And so that's why our buffer time was basically 0. But for fun, we're like, okay, so for 2024, we saw a lot of travel time fluctuation compared to average. Let's see what would have happened. And I think similarly with the activations and the deactivations, you can kind of see that it does a good job of catching some of these unexpected increases in travel time and trying to lessen the severity of them. And I think this kind of shows what happens there. Now, when we're talking about aggressive signal timing and high cycle lengths and all that kind of stuff, there's a very valid question that pops up. What about the side streets, right? Are we sacrificing our side streets for the good of the main corridor, which is a valid question. And so we made sure we looked at that. I apologize that these pictures are a little smaller than I would like. But we looked at every major side street approach into the corridor. And so for travel time, you saw we kind of saw a mix of decrease and increase, probably actually a little more increase than decrease, but by small amounts, right? 0.14 here, 0.07. The biggest one here was 0.33, which I'll talk about that in a second. But, kind of going back to some of what I've been preaching on the previous slides, what about that buffer time though? Are the travel times at least more reliable, especially when incidents occur? And similar, I think we saw some really promising results where we decreased on every approach that we measured for buffer time, except for this one here with an increase. Now, one thing that was kind of cool about that and looking at the data that came out of RITIS was we were like, why is this one like performing so much worse? Well, it turns out when we were activating these plans, there was something wrong with the controller, or something set wrong where it was dwelling on that coordinated phase for too long and not giving any green to the side street. And so this actually alerted us there was a problem. And so we're looking now to see how much it improved, but it looks like that actually did improve. So this helped us identify maybe where our plan wasn't working quite correctly, but everywhere else did decrease. I even want to point out this 0.07 decrease here, which I found interesting because we saw a reliability improvement, even though we saw a minor travel time increase on that. So I think it kind of goes to show you, we may sacrifice a little bit of time on the side streets, but I think it's done in a way that ensures a consistent drive for everybody. So lessons learned from this. There was a lot of good lessons learned. Lots of testing was needed. So we tested this for months and months on virtual controllers before we ever rolled it out in the field. And even when we rolled out in the field, we had a couple of kind of false starts on it. I mentioned, for example, that one signal was dwelling too much and not working in the way we wanted it to. Another thing that popped up was, our system is sending commands to the ATMS system to control the signals. Well, we didn't realize this was going to happen, but we're sending 10 commands to 10 signals, we were sending the commands all at once. And so when the ATMS system was ingesting it, it couldn't handle 10 commands at once. And so what was happening is some signals would get the plan, some wouldn't. And then when it would revert back, some would revert back, some wouldn't. And so we were actually uncoordinating our corridor, which really was not very useful. The fix was fairly simple. We just actually had to do it as 10 separate commands with 1 second gaps in between, and that actually is what fixed it. And so we had a few false starts like that. So you got to be patient with this. It definitely was not a first try success. The other thing was the virtual dynamic message sign was difficult. So I mentioned that really early on in this presentation. We definitely tested it and had it running, but we kind of ran into a lot of issues right off the bat of App Store requirements are really difficult. So I've never attempted to get an app on the Google Store or the Apple Store. Very difficult. To add to that as well, if you want to use it on the infotainment system, so like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, even more difficult. And honestly, the user interface didn't really work very well. And so we kind of got concerned of, well, if we can't, integrate with an infotainment system, well, what's kind of the point here? And so that was something we noticed. It's also public facing, so there's a level of quality control that we need to be able to ensure. And I think for the RTC, that was we weren't ready to make that commitment. I don't think we necessarily have the right staff or resources. And so we're kind of like, man, we need to be careful here. The other thing too, and I'm sure a lot of folks probably agree, there's already a lot of apps out there. Does the public really want to download another one? So those were kind of some lessons learned throughout that process there. And I'll talk a little bit more about the virtual DMS in a minute. Fiber communications are needed and are critical. You can probably get away with a cellular modem, but having reliable connections to those signals are really important to make sure they're getting the signal commands. We actually spent half this project budget went towards installing fiber to make sure all those signals on that corridor I showed you and some adjacent ones were connected to fiber. The last lesson that we learned was that there are a lot of potential benefits. And so now I'll get into those. So one of the big ones, scalability, right? So we didn't install any physical field sensors for the system. It's all just kind of based on just leveraging data that already exists out there. So one of the nice things was as we worked through Sparks Boulevard, kind of figured it out, we're comfortable with how it worked. We actually implemented this on the next corridor just to the east, Vista Boulevard, because now we kind of figured it out. We knew what we needed to do. And so that, it went from probably taking like a year to figure it out on Sparks Boulevard it took like 2 weeks on Vista. And so we were able to start spreading it throughout the system responsibly, of course, but we were able to really, start moving this around once we kind of had the concept figured out, at least to a point where we're comfortable. Reduce travel time and improve reliability. We talked about that. That seemed to be some fairly apparent results that we got. Coordinates data across jurisdictions. I think this is really important. The traveling public doesn't care what jurisdiction they're in. Neither does NRICS or RITIS data, right? Like it doesn't care if the city of Reno, city of Sparks. It's all these roads are connected. And I think that's really important is it helped us not have to try and integrate with every single system and try and get all these different data from sensors. It was a much more agnostic source of data, which is really important. No sensors or permits required. So, we talk about the costs, of course, related to sensors, but the schedule impacts too are huge, right? Especially because a lot of those sensors would have been installed in state right of way. And I'm not sure how other states compare, but our state DOT's permit process is not the quickest process ever. And so it's really nice to not have to deal with that. And especially for something we were trying to pilot test and we weren't even sure how well it was going to really work. It would have really hurt the project to have to go through all these, delays with permits and stuff. And then the last one, agencies control operations. So, one thing I've seen with off-the-shelf adaptive systems are that they kind of take over the controller and they do stuff that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do if you were timing the signal yourself. We're fairly confident in our timing plans. Our University of Nevada, Reno, our local university helps us out. And we have pretty good plans. And so we didn't want to give up the ability to do the plans. We just wanted a more creative way to invoke special plans when warranted. And so that was one thing we liked is that the logic controller stays separate from the signal controller in this setup. So some recognitions, I think once we kind of got our results and started publishing them, we've gotten some really good feedback. In fact, we actually received the ITE Mountain District TISMO award, and then that caused it to go to the international level, and we actually were awarded that for the TISMO Transportation Achievement Award. So that was really exciting. I think it kind of validated a little bit that this is something different and it's feasible. There's still, things we need to do, but I think we've had some really good success. So I think this was an important result for us. So next steps for us, we're going to keep going with this. Big thing right off the bat is add more corridors is something we'd like to do. Kind of like I mentioned, one of the big benefits of this is scalability. And, I think there's an opportunity to add more corridors, especially too, because you don't necessarily have to monitor the travel time on the corridor itself. You could monitor like the freeway travel time. And when it hits a certain point where people are going to start diverting to the arterials, you could use it that way. And so we want to explore a little more there too. I'd even like to look at actually doing this for our freeway main line and actually have ramp metering based off of the segment long travel time instead of relying on sensors right at the meter locations themselves, which kind of has its flaws. I do want to revisit the virtual DMS. So while it didn't necessarily go the way we wanted it to initially, I think there's a lot of potential in the information we can push out. And I think the strategy is to push to the established apps, whether it be Google Maps or Waze or, trying to get in with DriveWise or Haas Alert and any other kind of fleet vehicle management. I think that would be a good opportunity. And we're essentially sending the same messages. And so we want to revisit that. And we do believe it's useful information. I think it's just how we use that information is critical. Special events. So, we focused on non-recurrent congestion on an arterial based on just, our PM peak patterns and incidents on other roads. And so we want to look at like, how do we leverage this for special events, right? My initial kind of take looking at the INRIX data is you could do a good job of the ingress to an event with this, but how do you measure the egress coming out? Is there a way to, you might need to leverage it with some other sensors or look at some other creative ways. And so we want to figure out how we do that, especially for event egress. We want to coordinate this with emergency vehicle preemption and transit signal priority. There's a lot of cloud-based solutions coming there, and this is a cloud-based solution for signal management. So we view that as a logical opportunity. And then we want to investigate other data sources too. Are there fleet vehicle data that we can get? Weather data, it'd be interesting to integrate that into the system. We didn't have a ton of snow this past year, but on the days we did, we definitely saw where that snow maybe affected the way the system operated. A lot of just turning on and off. So maybe we could use weather data to potentially smooth that out. So thanks to everyone involved. This is a pretty long list. There was a lot of coordination. We had multiple public agencies, multiple vendors, consultants, contractors. So I named them all here, and we appreciate everybody's assistance on making this a successful project. And with that said, that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to take any questions if that's how we're doing it.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that was really great presentation. I know I have a whole bunch of questions personally, but I'm not sure how much time we have. So we do have a couple in the chat. I will defer to those first. And Nicole, let me know, if we need to move on to the next presentation. We have a question from Andrew Nichols. Is KH Traction using the same travel time data as RITIS INRIX XD? And if so, are they pulling from the INRIX API? It's Andrew's understanding that RITIS does some additional processing of that data, so he's curious if it's the same.
Yeah, so it's not exactly. That's a good question. So the short answer is we are pulling from INRIX's API and ingesting it in. I think you're right. I don't know all the details about exactly what RITIS does. I think there is some back-end ingestion. One thing we did when trying to kind of understand our thresholds there and making sure we were doing it right was we also created our own kind of spreadsheets to see how the Traction Connect system was ingesting that travel time data from the INRIX API so that we could kind of make sure we were on the right page with latency and those kind of things. And so that's a good point. While you can use this, to measure before and after, you do need to make sure you kind of check how your system's actually ingesting that so that you can adjust accordingly. But the Traction Connect is subscribed directly to the INRIX API.
Thank you. Another question from Ben Cheney. Which INRIX data product are you using for the travel time monitoring? You mentioned trajectory data, which he assumes is vehicle level, and discussed pushing data back to connected vehicles with the virtual DMS. But the trigger data corridor travel time seems like it would be adequate to use segment-based travel times or INRIX real-time traffic speeds travel times. If you use the vehicle level data, do you have a sense of how well the project would work with the segment level input data?
So that's a good question. I'm going to try my best to answer that one. I might get it wrong, but I was under the impression we were using the segment level data. Basically, the way I get it, is that we have access to the 60. We currently have 60 centerline miles of live travel time data we can use, and then we build the segments ourselves. And so we are using segment data, and I agree with you. I think that's a good way to do it, because one thing we noticed with this corridor, like when we were measuring before and after when it came to intersections, was sometimes our queuing was so significant that it would actually go back into other intersections. And so trying to just look at it from an intersection level, it was maxing out essentially, and so we didn't see a change. And so we kind of focused on like, hey, let's just look at the entire corridor. We know congestion kind of propagates itself through, and that is ultimately what we did. So I agree with it. I wish I could explain it technically a little bit better, but that's essentially the route we went.
Cool. We have time for another one, Nicole, or do we need to move on? So I was
No, go ahead. We have
okay,
a
cool. Yeah, I
couple
was just
minutes.
curious, Alex, if you changed anything like after doing this initial analysis, did you tweak anything with the way the system was working? Other than, you mentioned a couple things where you figured out how things weren't working. I was just curious if some of the analysis that you shared ended up, sort of revising the project based on that.
Yeah, so the biggest one we changed were those not so much the thresholds, but how long it needed to stay over that to trigger or deactivate. So I think if I remember correctly, we needed 10 consecutive minutes to get it to turn on, and then we needed 30 consecutive minutes to turn off. And so once we started seeing the data and we got more confident, we started tightening that up. And so those were probably the biggest ones. Some other things on some other corridors we saw is we drew some segments that were a little too short, and we didn't get like a nice kind of range of data to go off of. And so we definitely, for some other ones we're looking at, we've been extending the segments to try and get like a better representation of the data. But the biggest thing was tweaking those kind of operating parameters and trying to find where we could get ahead of the congestion, but also not be, not activated too early. And that was a little bit of a trial and error process for us. So I'd say that was the biggest one.
That's cool. And sort of related to that, I'm just curious how you used the analysis you shared in this presentation. Was it mostly internal, or have you also used it in communicating to the public, as far as trying to explain what you're doing with this project?
Yeah, so the answer is a little bit of both. We definitely started internally, but then as we had to, kind of figure out like how do we measure this? That was kind of the tricky part initially. And then as we got confident, we were now putting it out to the public. We want to have like a better dashboard moving forward of like communicating this more real time. We're not there yet, but we're working on kind of a final project performance report too that we're going to put out to the public and share with everybody. So we're almost done. I think we're about 95% complete. But getting that out, because I agree, it's really critical for the public to understand what we're doing. And also too, I think the more people you can get to use these apps and supply data, it's, we're not trying to spy on people, but it's really helpful to, there's a lot you can do with that data.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that all makes sense. And I think people appreciate travel time reliability, and just the way you're trying to improve travel time. So hopefully it resonates with the public when you share it. So thank you. Great presentation. In the
Yeah.
interest of time, we can move on here.
And feel free, just before we go, I think hopefully they'll share my slides, which is totally fine. Feel free to contact me, email me if you have any questions. I'm not saying this is the exact configuration you need to use, but I
Sure.
think this concept has a lot of potential. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And so now we'll move on to Greg Jordan, to talk about using trips data to calibrate travel demand models. So take it away, Greg.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm switching to take over to show this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. We're going to talk about travel demand models and also a little bit about microsimulation models and how investigations are underway about using the empirical data from trips pathway data to see how we can help calibrate or validate these models. Generally about models, why do we make models? To evaluate potential benefits and impacts of proposed or completed projects, produce materials for the public, partner agencies, stakeholders, et cetera, and then also generate traffic flow data estimates throughout a region, so that we can use them for other investigations. Generally speaking, models come at essentially a macro regional level, which is statewide or for a particular large MPO. Or you could have micro areas which are project level. You're coming zooming in and you're actually going to model the movement of individual vehicles or anything in between. What's interesting about it is a travel demand model, a regional model, is capable of producing OD trip tables. In other words, it's taking all its data and putting out a trip table, which is interesting because local project area models need to have trip tables to do the analysis that's needed. So there's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the two. You build a good travel demand model, you make better local models. Because local model, if you calibrate it to current conditions, how do you know what it's going to look like 10 or 20 or 30 years from now? That's where you go back to your travel demand model and say, give me an OD, use your prediction of the future to give me a better model. Here's just an example of a statewide display of the Tennessee's model. These are traffic volumes by link projected for the year 2040 across the state of Tennessee. So we're going to talk about investigation by the by NCT COG, North Central Texas Council of Governments, the MPO for Dallas-Fort Worth. They have a regional model called the Transportation Analytical Forecasting Tool, TAFT, and they're investigating whether or not probe data can be used to calibrate or validate their regional model, the TAFT. So just a quick summary of what goes into the model. We've got general household survey, employment data, land use patterns, census data, demographics, all of the things about where people or freight is located, plus you have the networks to move them around, as in your highway and your transit networks. You have volumes or information speeds for a lot of those networks. And then for all of these, you forecast the future. What is the land use going to be for the next 5 or 10 or 20 years? And that's what gives it all a ability to predict the future. So all of that goes into the regional travel demand model, like the TAFT. What comes out of it? You get an origin destination, a zone-to-zone trip table by mode. You get estimated vehicle volumes and speeds for all your highway segments. You also get trips on transit. You get a mobile source emissions for pollutants. So there's a lot of information that comes out of these models. So back to the question, can we use probe data to help calibrate or validate these models? Traditional validation says this. You take your model and you output volumes or speeds or travel times for other data that you have that you know and you trust. So if you draw a screen line across the state and you count volumes across the screen line, you can actually have counted volumes, and then you also have projected volumes, and you can see how well they match. Earlier, I talked about the symbiotic relationship between these, and this also serves to validate the big model. Suppose you have a very small study area, and let's make it as simple as can be. We've got eastbound traffic coming in at 1,000 vehicles per hour, and we count the destinations for those vehicles, and we count on the ground. 110 of them are turning right, 580 are going straight, and 310 are going left. Now we can go to our regional model and cut out this little tiny area and ask the model what the model thinks these OD assignments are. And let's say the model comes back and says 10% are going to D1, that's 100, 30% and 60%. So if we put the numbers next to the actual counts, we say, wow, our regional model has really nailed this count, which means that this helps validate the regional model. And it also says we like using the regional model if we want to use the data in a small micro model. So we've validated it. Now, what about a better method to calibrate it is what if you get real empirical OD tables in the field and compare it to what comes out of the model? You can get license plate matching. You can trace from overhead video. You can match Bluetooth IDs, to name a few. It's hard and expensive to get the information, or at least historically, it has been hard. But speaking of history, I'm going way back to when I flew helicopters around to get field data. hovering a helicopter. Here's an example of model data on the right. The column says model. These are modeled splits of traffic. And these are the helicopter splits. And notice how 41, 49, 19, 16, these are all relatively close. And this says good things about the travel demand model. My clients told me the reason they kept hiring me, though, is that every so often the travel demand model misses something totally out to lunch. And we see that here with movement 5, where you got 98% and 2%. It's just basically leaving out, this was a freeway. That's in the morning. And in the evening, it gave 100% to the one and nothing to the second. So these are the things that we're looking to use. How can we validate the model? So North Central Texas Council of Governments, they get trip data. NRIX's trip paths data is funded by the DOT. Can this be used for validation of the travel demand model? What have they done so far? So far, they did a test of a high demand corridor and came up with just like we did before. The example I gave, they had a very nice calibration. Those volumes matched nicely like the green numbers we just had when they used the RITIS OD trip tables. They also tried it with an OD table that came out of their Taft, and that was not good. In the words of the analyst, is that it was not successful. What else have they done? They license an OD trip tables from probe data from Cambridge Systematics, the locus data set, and they found that they had reasonable matches with their model trip tables. They are now doing the same using the RITIS OD tables, and so far they're very happy with the results. For example, these are their slides. Essentially, each dot on here is a zone that has an origin count and a destination count provided by RITIS, which is the x-axis, and provided by their model, which is the y-axis. So you could plot each one, and what we're seeing is a very nice straight line as we go out to the future. Now, these RITIS counts have been expanded. If they were perfectly expanded, the blue line would sit right up on top of the dashed line. So there might be a little issue with expansion here. Not sure. It's not my product. I'm not an expert about this, but these are reasonably well behaved. And the R squared comes down at 88%. So they're very happy with that. Now, these are the origins, very similar results for the destinations. And again, they're doing more ongoing work for this. You also have the ability to take travel times and compare them. Here's an example. This is their graph again, where you've got the RITIS. These are essentially for the table, how long are trips taking? If they take less than 5 minutes, they go in the first bin. If they take, they're basically counting how many trips in each bin. And notice, ideally, a perfect rate would have exactly the same for both of these. These are very closely tracking. Where did they get the numbers? They basically went into the RITIS OD matrix. They took the average travel times, and that's what you're seeing on the red side. So here's a demonstration of how these are their actual examples of what they actually used to run this. And of course, Trip Analytics essentially has a database of somewhere around 10, give or take, % of real world trips, higher for trucks than cars. You take the GPS pings and snap them to the roadway network. Each trip has a time and date stamp as it moves along. For privacy, the endpoints are blurred. And then you have, generally speaking, if you have a statewide data set, you have the entirety of the trips, even if they start outside the state or end outside the state. So what do you produce? You basically find a bunch of trips that you care about and put them together and say, where are they coming from and going to? There's your OD matrix. You can take that data and stick it on a map, which is a zone map. They're the same numbers. It's just a different way to look at it. And then you have a route and a route map in a table, and you can actually consolidate the routes and see and draw screen lines to say, you know, before and after the bridge crack was found and they closed the bridge, you know, how did traffic shift? So this is a very fast catch up here. If you've got a trip, how do you find trips? You put polygons on the map. And here's the trip. you might want to know up north, where are the trips going that started in this polygon? And that will find this trip. I want trips that started inside the polygon, ended outside. That will find this trip. You can do the same thing at the destination. Where are trips coming from that end inside my polygon? You can also give two polygons, a from and a to. Say, find trips that started here and ended there. Or you can throw a gate across, let's say, a bridge and say, find me where the trips are coming from and going to that crossed this bridge. So the data set is a Texas data set. It includes trips that started as far away as, North Dakota. Here are the scenarios that they were using to do the analysis. These are all different scenarios where you're looking at light vehicles in September, light vehicles in June, spring and fall light vehicles by month, and so forth. For each of these, we're going to pop one of these open, and it looks like they're looking at by weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You see the number of trips found, 1.5 million, 1.5 million, 1.9 million. Let's look closer at the Wednesday. We're going to open this up, click it up, and see this query. This is the study area. This is the MPA for the MPO. They have custom shape files that have been loaded. This is what they look like. So when trips start or end in these zones, that's where they get reported. Once you've set it up and you've defined how you want O's and D's reported, you can use a spatial filter like the study area and say, find trips that started inside and ended inside, started outside, ended outside. So you check all the boxes, you gather up all these trips, and then you produce, you set temporal filters. When do you want it? In this case, it was September from 6 in the morning till 10 in the morning. That's this particular scenario using light vehicles, which are essentially passenger cars. Are we using connected vehicle data or cell phone data? And the answer, we're using both. And by the way, this study was back in 2019. That was pre-COVID. That's the year that they decided they wanted to analyze. And then you submit it. And when you submit it, you get back an OD matrix. Here are the 1,900,032 trips that were found. You can also pop open and choose things like, well, the matrix, those zones they had is 5,300 cells by 5,300 cells. But you can also switch and look at your average travel time. And the average travel time is what was used to draw this out. Once you're done, you can export it for use in your model. So this is what the visualization looks like of plotting the origins of all those trips. We can zoom in and we can zoom in some more. And these are the origins. These are the destinations. Again, the zone map lets you visualize your data. And then this is a super zoom over at the DFW airport, and you can get your counts and so on. So I went pretty quickly. I'm ready to handle questions. The investigators are named right here, and we can, they are going to be, they said they want to give a presentation here, but they want to finish before they go. So that's the plan. So I'm ready for questions if anyone has questions.
Thanks, Greg. So far, just one question in there. Looks like Michael is answering. It was Florida DOT asking if they have access to trip analytics. So we'll let Michael answer that one. And if anybody else has questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A. You can also continue to think about it and enter them as we move into the next presentation. So I guess seeing no other questions, I think we could go ahead and move on to Michael and Charles with new features and capabilities. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about a few new features and a lot of work in progress to kind of get people excited about what's coming around the corner here. Later this month, we're going to be deploying access to historic road weather data in trend maps. Road weather data is essentially, we're taking National Weather Service radar data and RWIS data, and we're mapping down to the roadway per segment how much and what type of precipitation is falling on the roadway at any point in time. We archive that for years. And in the trend map, typically use the trend maps to look at historic speeds on the roadways, but now you can look at historic weather on individual roads or all the roads in a particular region. And you can use a time slider at the bottom to move forward and backwards in time. These are interactive, so you can click on each of the segments for whatever time range you care about, and it'll tell you what precipitation type and the rate of precipitation there was on the roadway. If you're just looking at speed data, you can still click on the speed data and will tell you what precipitation is going on at the same time, so you don't have to just look at the road weather data by itself. And you'll be able to do this for multiple time ranges, so you can compare one date to another date to another date to another date and see how all that plays out. This is expected to deploy by the end of the month, and everyone who has access to Probe Data Analytics and RITIS will get access to that. The next steps, though, things we want to build in the future, are integrating the radar weather data into the trend map and in the Region Explorer. So it's not just the road weather, but it's the actual radar images as well. That's still got a few months of work on it before that'll be ready. We are still continuing to make really good progress on our larger scale mapping and animation engines. This allows you to look at more things all at once, more quickly, and doing so in a 3D projection, not just a 2D projection. This still has a few months to go, but we are far enough along that we are looking for some early adopters who would like to test this on our behalf and give us feedback into the UI changes and to the performance of the system as well. So if this is something that interests you, please just send me an email or send an email to support at ritis.org. Either way is fine, and we'll put you in the queue for testing this out before it goes officially live. Other progress that we're making is related to evaluating some new data sets on behalf of some agencies. So we've a few of our clients, so to speak, have purchased data from Compass and Arity. Compass provides data from vehicles in near real time, so like every 3 to 5 seconds you can get a ping from the vehicle, plus other sensor data off of the vehicles. And Arity does something similar. They're around 15-second ping rates, and you can get information about safety events like speeding and heavy braking and that sort of stuff as well. Now, why do we care about this? What are our clients looking at? They're specifically looking at being able to animate in real time how vehicles are responding to incidents on the roadway. Now, it's a little hard to tell, but if you stare very closely at these triangles, especially the green ones, you can see that they're moving. So this is a real-time animation. I mean, this is a screen recording I took, but it was real time, where you can see the vehicles moving around on the roadways. You see there's a crash that's occurred here, and there's queues that are building up, and some vehicles are starting to take detours and move around the lane blockages on the roadway. Now, at this zoom level, it's really hard to see what's going on. But if you zoom in and get to like the city level view, then you can start to see some actual movement without having to squint your eyes and hold your mouse over a particular location. So here we're down in the DC area, and now we've got cars and trucks moving around on the roadway. You can see some of them getting stuck at traffic signals, and the signals will change eventually, and you'll see some of these vehicles start to pick up speed and move through the intersection. We're working on new ways to visualize this, especially at the further out zoom levels, maybe showing tails so you can see the paths that the vehicles are taking. But we're working with compass and arity on implementing these. And hopefully by the next meeting that we have, I'll be able to show this live in the system for the region for which our clients are procuring this data. It could be useful for evacuation monitoring as well. We'll just have to see. We're very close to deploying a trip analytics-like tool that will look at maritime data. So we are consuming maritime data worldwide, and the goal is to use the trip analytics to look at origins and destinations and bottlenecks as well. And why would highway operations folks care about this? Well, there are places where you have ports, where you have lots of trucks going into the ports to pick up goods. And there's a distinct relationship between when vessels arrive in a port and when you have additional truck traffic going into an area. There are also drawbridges throughout the country that open and close when certain types of vessels come into an area. So we think there's going to be some use cases for the real-time maritime data analytics, but also historic analytics as well to look at logistical bottlenecks and shipping bottlenecks. So we'll do some live demos of that during our next user group meeting, but this work is coming along really well. Then we have something similar that we've built out for aviation trip analytics. So being able to look at different airports around the country and around the world and clicking on them and seeing where flights are coming from or going to, and then being able to filter down by airlines and all sorts of other metrics. We think this will have some value to some of you as well. And then I think the biggest thing that we're working on right now is the automated work zone reporting tool. So this is being funded by the RITIS Enhancement Working Group. Bob Fry from MassDOT, I believe he's on the call today. He's the leader of this particular group. And this is funding us to build out some work zone reporting tools where you essentially be able to go in to the Pro Data Analytics Suite, click on a work zone location, and then give it a week that you want to analyze. And it's going to go in automatically and print out a bunch of performance reports to tell you how well you're meeting certain performance objectives for that particular work zone. The progress on this is coming along swimmingly. We expect the first version of this to be deployed in December, but these are actual screenshots from the system and the queries that are functioning today. So you can see the work zone location and see which lanes are impacted, how many events there might have been during the week or whatever date range you chose, and all sorts of other metrics. There's graphics that show you the queue buildup over time for different days of the week. Other congestion scan graphics that pop up showing each week and which days the construction was active. Same thing for user delay cost and vehicle hours of delay in work zones and which days had particularly high user delay cost. We still have work that needs to be done on some other major features, including these line chart comparisons. And these will include weather data as well. So you'll be able to see if weather was a factor in work zone performance, in addition to just the lane closures themselves. So all of that is coming together really nicely. I'm pleased with the progress that we've been making so far. And thank you all for your support in funding this work. By the end of this calendar year, everyone is going to be required to use two-factor authentication in your RITIS login. So be aware, you'll start to get some warning messages as you start to log in and tell you, hey, you've got 2 months left. Hey, you've got 1 month left, or now it's time. And you'll have different options for how that two-factor authentication will work, like text messages or emails or using some sort of like a Duo type application on your phone to give you a code. It should be pretty similar to how two-factor authentication works with any other application that you use two-factor authentication on today. So just be aware that that's coming around and will be implemented fairly soon. And now what I'm going to do is hand things over to Charles Latimer, who leads up the signal analytics tools and feature development. And he's going to talk to you about some of the new stuff that's just been deployed and stuff that's coming soon. Have at it, Charles.
All right, thank you, Michael. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so signal analytics. So we're going to become another sister tool as part of the RITIS suite here. So we're going to talk about some basically some simple use cases. We'll start off with that that some of our users have come up with, and where they're going to kind of show how some new features that we have just deployed that make those use cases easier to apply. And then we're going to talk about some of the new tools that are on the way here shortly. So real quick, for those of you who aren't familiar with signal analytics, it's basically a tool that uses trajectory data to generate signal performance metrics for intersections across the country. The nice thing about this is that you don't need any infrastructure by the side of the road, unlike some other methods that are very detector dependent. This comes from trajectory probe data, so it can be deployed anywhere in the country very quickly, and is easy to use. So like many of the other PDA tools, it has a two-step process as far as getting information. So first you build your query, where you pick your signals and do your time of day, day of the week, and then your report comes back, and then you can then apply filters based upon columns and values. And I'm going to show you why. The next slide, you'll see why this is important here. But for those of you who use RITIS and PDA quite a bit, which I'm sure most of you on the call do, this is a very similar workflow here. So these are the use cases that some of our users have come up with. I'm going to go through three really quickly here. So the first one is longest delays late night. So one way that you can use the tool is to kind of help identify, like kind of maintenance issues. Maybe where do I have stuck detection or opportunities to improve signal timing. So what you can do is you can take a look at, just examine things during the overnight period, particularly 12 to 5. If you're out at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can imagine there's not a lot of traffic on the road, so you would expect to have very low delays at intersections. The traffic signal should respond fairly quickly. So if you see high delays on any of the approaches, that might be an indication that something is going on. So in your query settings, you can look at the most recent 2 weeks of data. We recommend looking at the weekdays only, and then also kind of just during those midnight to 5 a.m. Time period there. When your report comes back, you can then apply some filters to that. So your vehicle count, greater than 5 seems to work, and then looking at your left and your through movements, kind of filtering, look at those. Once you do that, you can kind of look through your results, and if you start seeing control delays that are higher than, say, 45 to 60 seconds, you might kind of ask yourself, is this reasonable? Would I expect to see this? And if not, that would be a good candidate, when you run the report to, go check it out the next morning and see that might be an issue, a place where you might have someone to check and see what's going on. A second use case is for speeds. So highest speeds on approach. So obviously high traffic speeds, approaching signals, that can be a potential safety issue. Might be an indication of people, running that yellow light or red light running, trying to kind of beat the red there. So settings that our users have found that have worked really well is kind of looking at all days of the week, and then kind of that 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. time period. So kind of that overnight. Traffic is a little bit less constrained there, so it can kind of get up to speed, and that kind of gives you, that's kind of tends to be when you kind of see those things happening a lot of times. When you get once the report comes back, some of the filters you can apply, you can kind of just look at kind of your major, like greater than 100 vehicles, so you're not, that kind of helps filter out some of the outliers. And you can then just filter down on your through movements, because that's what you're really concerned with. at the results, kind of look for kind of high differential speeds between your average and your max speeds, approach speeds. We've also users have also found it good to look for high 75th percentile speeds. That's kind of a good indication there as well. That's kind of why greater than 100 vehicles. That's kind of you have a large sample to choose from. And then you can ask yourself, should I kind of tweak my yellow-red clearance times or something on for these intersections? So just this is not the only determiner, but you can it can definitely flag some of those intersections where you might want to do some further investigation for some potential adjustments there. And then finally, the last one is kind of most stops on busy through movements. So if you have like a major road, you're going to want to, most of the time, you want to have something called good progression. So you've seen this before. You're driving down the road. You're in a pack of vehicles and the light turns to green before you get there and you kind of pass through. So that's called good progression when you have like blocks of vehicles that can move through on greens through multiple signals down the road. So because of that, you want to check to see, am I getting good arrival on green? So that's kind of one thing you can check on the report. So looking at the busiest times of the day, so 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during weekdays, and then looking at say maybe greater than 2,000 vehicles, since we're looking at major movements, you might need to change that based upon the samples you get in your area. Bigger cities, you might need to go higher. Smaller cities, you can go a little bit lower. And then you want to filter in your through movements. And then kind of look and see is kind of sort by percent on green and find ones that are less than 40%. And kind of ask yourself, again, is that something I would expect? And might there be an opportunity there to improve the timing or maybe adjust my offsets that might help improve that progression there? So with that in mind, we've come up with some custom presets that you can, so all those filters that I just went through on the previous slides, you can now save those in the Signal Analytics tool and make those easy to apply and retrieve. So instead of having to manually do that every time you logged in and do a report, you now have this drop down here where you can apply those filters there. These filters are these presets are all user created. So when you log into the system now, you're just going to see the default values. You have to create these yourself. But they're very easy to do. So you can just basically go in and you apply the filters and choose your columns. And then once you have things set up the way you want to, you can just go ahead and hit this little disk icon here, save your preset with a name, and then it will then be added to this drop-down menu. So next time you come in, you can just run your report and then just pick on the preset you want, and it'll apply your filters and just show you the columns you want. Now, another reason that's important is if you're going to export this data for offline analysis, the way things used to work is the only option you had was to get pretty much all of the data that we had kind of in the background there. So like 67 worth of columns worth of data. So that's a good thing if you're doing data discovery or if you're feeding a system that can, like Power BI, that can go ahead and do dashboards on top of that. But if you're doing like a monthly report and you're just interested in a few number of columns, it can be a little bit tedious to weed through that. So what you can do now is once you've kind of set these, you've filtered the way you want, you can then save just the displayed data columns. And what it'll do is it'll take just the ones you see on the screen and put those into a CSV file. So that's really good for regular reports. Should really be able to cut down on data post-processing and kind of really save you time there. So we've had a number of users request that, and so we're really excited to have that deployed there. Another thing that we're currently working on are some templates. So kind of those examples that I just talked about. Our goal is to get those typed up here and get those up on the Signals templates page there. So you'll be able to download and use those as well. Basically just kind of an invitation. If you're currently a Signals user and have some good use cases that you think other users would benefit from, feel free to reach out to myself or Michael Pack, and we'd love to talk with you and see if we can get those included in the future templates as well. A couple things that are currently on the way now that'll be in development shortly is performance charts. So um, basically the ability, so these will be a couple new tools here. So you'll be able to take a look at kind of one of our tools. You'll be able to take a look at your patterns based upon time of the day and combine a couple different metrics on the chart at the same time. So maybe we can see how like percent on green correlates with kind of detected vehicles through the intersection. So you'll be able to do that. And then also finally trend charts. So we've had users ask for, is there a good way to do before and after studies and kind of see and kind of track performance over time? Well, that's where the trend charts will come in. So you'll be able to kind of pull reports over, say, a monthly or a several week time period, and then be able to kind of drill down and see what those metrics look like as they change over time. So either before or after your signal retiming projects, how do things change seasonally based upon time of the year? The goal is for you to be able to see those more easily. So, and with that, I'll turn things back over to Michael here. We'll kind of open the floor up for questions, I believe, and go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Charles and Michael. Yeah, we've had some activity in the Q&A box, so hopefully, folks, if you're monitoring that, if you click on the answered tab, you can see a bunch of questions have been answered. A couple reactions to Greg's presentation using these tools for models. Clarification that we will send out a link to the video recording and also post it to the Coalition's YouTube channel, along with questions and answers. Couple questions about the snow and how that's tracked. Michael provided some good clarification there, and also the work zone tool. So at this point too, if anybody has any additional questions, now's the time for that. Feel free to put them in the Q&A box, or also you can use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you if you wanted to elaborate on anything there. Let's see, I do see another new question that we haven't quite gotten to yet about integration with Sidra or Synchro. I'm assuming that one is for Charles, probably.
Yes, I'll go ahead and type an answer in for that. Currently, there's no direct integration with the modeling software.
Got another question that just came in asking how is AI integrated with RITIS? So, Michael, I don't know if you want to take that one.
So it depends on the application and depends on how you define AI. So there are several algorithms where we use machine learning techniques, which is a subset of AI for prediction and computing certain performance metrics. There's a Q prediction algorithm that we have that uses a machine learning algorithms for that. What we are working on now are ways to interact with some of these query forms using large language models. So instead of having to go through and click buttons, here and there and enter in specific date ranges and knowing the order to do that, we've experimented with ways to just have a conversation with almost like a chat bot that then asks you some questions and ultimately generates the queries automatically for you. And then after the queries results return, doing some sort of summary analysis to point out statistically significant events and trends. That is still a ways away from being in production. One of the reasons is there are rules from these data providers against you taking some of these data sets and putting them into large language models and uploading them to like a chat GPT type of a thing. So to enable these AI applications, we have to essentially build our own LLM local, and then you're allowed to store the data and work with it in that way. So those are some challenges we're working on right now, but expect to see more about that in the future.
Wow, that's really cool. That was a different answer than I was expecting, but of course I should have known you guys were working on some cool stuff there. Um, One other question came in while you were talking there, asking about the work zone data and lane closure information and just where it's coming from and how it's validated, essentially.
Oh, so it depends on the agency. So some agencies, the work zone data might come from a WZDX feed that your agency may have implemented. In other cases, it might come directly from your ATMS or a lane closure permitting system or even your 511 system in some cases. It just depends on the agency and how they've decided to provide that data to us. So in the automated work zone reporting tool, you'll be able to select from the list of work zones that are provided to us and just select that work zone, and then a bunch of things will automatically populate for you. However, if your agency isn't providing your work zone data to us, then you can still manually go in and tell the system, here's where my work zone was. It started here, it ended here. Here's the times in which it was active and that sort of thing. And then the tool will still work. It's just a little less automated for you.
For that clarification. It looks like someone also put a previous question that I believe Alex did answer this, and I think he had to jump off. So I think the question was about kind of what INRIX product they had used, and I do believe he said they were using kind of segment-based travel time, not vehicle level data. I see
That
Michael
is
nodding,
correct.
so I think
Yeah.
I got that right.
Yeah, you did.
Great. Lots of good questions today. Appreciate the feedback from everybody.
So I think we're also at the point now where we're just soliciting general feedback. So if anyone has anything that they want to see added to RITIS, a feature that's not there today that you think is needed, or if there's something that's not working the way that you want it to work, this is your time to complain. And you can complain openly right here. We're happy to hear what's on your mind. I believe we also have, do we have a polling question that allows people to give feedback as well?
Yep, I added two.
Yeah, so if you're uncomfortable speaking, we'll open this polling question, and it's just a big text box, and you can rant. You can also feel free to write to me directly. You can also, Jesse has fielded some questions in the past, and we can get all those things worked up through the RITIS enhancement working group. See what we can build out.
Yeah, definitely encourage folks to provide your feedback and ideas. A lot of great enhancements have come about this way. Michael and the team do a great job of taking that feedback and figuring out how to implement it if it's possible. So we really rely on that feedback and appreciate everybody using the tools and letting us know how things are working or not working. I think that weather tool is going to get a lot of use. I know, I think folks everywhere are dealing with all kinds of different events. I know in our region we've had a lot of flooding events, heavy rain, things like that. So looking forward to exploring some of those tools. Thanks again to everybody for attending today and all of our speakers. A lot of great presentations, a lot of great information. Really appreciate participation. I think we had almost the entire country participating today, from up and down the East Coast, all through the Midwest and to the West Coast. So really cool to see that participation.
And as we sign off here, we'll just keep the poll an open discussion open so people who are writing can continue to do so. Have at it.
Mhm. Yes, we appreciate that input. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse. And yes, thank you everyone for attending today.